Hello, everybody. This is Brant Brinkerhoff from Ash Games, and today I'm answering questions about participating in board game competitions. Now, board game competitions were not something that I knew even existed a few years ago, but over the last, I'd say 2 years, I've participated in 4 different board game design competitions, and I've fared fairly well. And so it's been a very interesting journey, and I've definitely learned a whole lot going through it. So let's jump into the questions and see where the conversation takes us. Question number 1. How do you find out about different competitions? Well, for me, and the first competitions that I ever threw my hat into the ring for, I found out from friends who happen to listen to board game design podcasts or participate in Facebook communities, or they're just kind of out and they hear about things and then they'd say, "Hey, you should do this." And I'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely doing that. What was that again?" And I would go look it up and learn about it. So I actually didn't even know much about any of them until people started saying, "Hey, you should participate in this or that." And as I've done that, I've started to learn of more and more and more, especially as I've become more and more involved in the design community. I've also have a wonderful resource in the local board game design guild that is right here in my area. As I've participated more in that, we have our own Discord server with its own dedicated channel to board game design competitions. So now whenever anybody hears of anything, they'll just throw it in that channel. And so that's another way that at least I'm able to keep up with it. A lot of the Discord playtesting communities have that same type of thing. And they do a pretty good job of whenever somebody finds out about a competition, they'll post it there. But there's also places, if you Google around the internet, you'll find some things. BGG has a number of lists. Probably the most prominent one shows the bigger competitions that are out there, because there are ones that are a lot bigger and that have been around for a lot longer. And they're more of like international, and they're just kind of like all around type of competitions. And then there are also a whole lot of really small competitions that are run by different groups or businesses or communities, like a Facebook group or a podcast or a business. And a lot of those things they're running competitions both to kind of get exposure to what they're doing, but also support the community in a meaningful way. And so lots of different opportunities that are out there. You just have to kind of start looking around and keep your ear to the ground. And it doesn't take long until you to stumble across one. All right, next question. All right, how do board game competitions work? For the most part, to enter the competition is going to require a few things. First, they're going to require an image and a block of text, a brief description about the game. And then most will have other things that they'll require, like a sell sheet or a video, like a short video, 2 to 5 minute videos, usually the range that most ask for. But I'll be completely honest, those parts are important, but that image and that little block of text, right, those 3 sentences that you get, that's usually what people who are reviewing the game, that's the very first thing they see. They see the picture and they say, that picture looks interesting. Then they read the thing and they'll say, that game sounds interesting. If those 2 things aren't working, they likely will never watch your video. They'll likely never look at your sell sheet, and they'll never go farther. And so that's one of the first things to know is each asset that you're asked to deliver really, really matters. It really needs to be dialed in, and it needs to be well produced and thoughtful. You can't just throw it together at the last minute and then hope that it'll come out good on the other end. It probably won't. You might catch a few people who are extra interested, or they're just good people and they'll just look at everything just because they're very thorough. But most people, they don't do it that way. They'll get their first impression. If their first impression is good, they'll move to their second. If the second's good, they'll move to the third. And that's the only way to get through. So each of those parts will matter. So anyway, you submit your entry, which is usually you just supply a bunch of information, some imagery, a video possibly. And then each competition is actually a little different with what happens after that. Some competitions happen across multiple rounds. And so you might need to submit certain things for the first round. And if you get past that, then you'll submit new things for the second round. And then you'll submit new things for the third round. Others, like the Ion Award, you submitted it, and then it was just radio silence for a few months until they said, you're a finalist, and then it's radio silent for another couple weeks to a month. And then they say, show up at the convention and you can demo the game, and then we'll let you know a day later. And so very hands off, right? Like there wasn't a lot of extra stuff that happened in between, but some are very hands on. There's some that every few weeks or every few months, there's something new that you need to submit if you're moving on to the next round. All right, next question. What does the submission process look like? Oh, I kind of already covered off on that, but you gather your assets and you'll submit it. It's usually through like a Google form, because like I said, a lot of these things are smaller and they're run by just a group, right? It's not like a big convention. There are some of the bigger awards are through bigger conventions, and those are a little bit more buttoned up sometimes. But most of these competitions are actually fairly small. And so they might not have all that great of communication. They might not spell out exactly what's going on all the time, or exactly what's needed, or exactly what to expect. And you just kind of have to do as much homework as you can, and then, try to follow their instructions as best as possible. So, all right, next question. Do you get to show or demo your game? All right, so in the the four that I've participated in, 3 of them, there was none of that. There was no demoing, no showing. Like you were not a participant in any part of the judging or any of it. For the Ion Award, it was quite a bit different, though. Like I said, it was you submit, and then basically what happens is it gets submitted, and especially for the Ion Award, all of the judges are publishers, and so these publishers go through all the entries. They select the ones that they want to actually see played. And then at the convention, they all get together again, and you go in and actually demo the game for them. So you have a window of, I think it was like 40 minutes or something like that, where you all sit down together and you're able to play a few rounds. You're able to explain the game, the theme, how it all works, and actually take them through a few rounds so they can get a feel for it. And then they can ask questions. And so, you kind of have like this little block of time that you can actually interact with them. And then after that, then nothing else until they announce who the winner was. But that was the only one that actually included a live demo. Usually what happens is, it gets sent off, and either there's a panel of judges or there's a community that's voting to move games through the system until it gets narrowed down to a few finalists. And then usually in that finalist round, you're submitting a physical prototype for people to actually sit down and play, whether that's, again, publishers or just individuals who are in the design community or in the game industry who are playing the game and doing the judging. And so they'll be actually sitting down and playing the game together. Next question. How ready does the game need to be? Do you need the art complete, etc.? All right, well, really this depends on what your expectations are from getting out of even participating at all. So really the game, the more ready the game is, the farther it has the potential to go. So if you just barely started working on the game, the prototype is still pretty rough. The gameplay has a few flaws, or, it plays really well one way, but if someone does one thing, it breaks, those types of things. If the game isn't quite ready, it probably won't go very far, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't submit it, because there's still value in submitting something that is not refined or finished. In fact, that's what the Board Game Design Workshop is all about. And that one is run by Chris Anderson, who has a fantastic podcast. And the whole competition there is, it's all about refining, and it's actually a workshop, right? It's about refining and making games better. And so the reward at the end is nothing more than feedback and actually having your game be better as it's looked at and scrutinized by a whole lot of people, a community of other designers who are passionate about the same thing that you are in. And so it all really depends on which ones you're participating in and what's your motivation and what you're hoping to get back out of it will kind of determine how ready the game will need to be. Certainly, you do not need to have final, finished, perfect artwork, especially if you're hoping to get picked up by a publisher, because they're very likely going to take the game, do further development, and then actually bring in an illustrator or an artist to do the artwork. And so having done all of that up at front is kind of a wasted expense. That said, we judge things based on how they look and their aesthetics and how they relate and they resonate with us. And so there is this balance. Like you don't want it to just look awful. I mean, you could have a really good game and people get excited about it and it not look good, and it could go all the way. I'm not saying it can't, but often the ones that are making it past, certain steps are the ones that also look really great. They look finished. They look polished. And I think it's because the judges can see it and they say, yeah, it feels like a real game when I'm playing it, but it also just like looks like I can envision this on my shelf. I can envision this on my table. I can envision pulling this out to play with my friends at a game night, right? And so the further you can get it there without too heavy of an investment, you'll actually, you're giving yourself an edge, an advantage. So it's a little bit of a toss-up, but it's certainly not an absolutely required type of thing. All right, next question. How different are the judging criteria for different competitions? Very different, actually. And some of them are not at all transparent about how they're judging, what they're judging on, or any of that. And so in many respects, it's like, is it just which one you liked the most? Or was there any type of structure behind this? And you just don't know because they just don't tell you. But there are other competitions who are very upfront and they actually have a rubric and they give you the rubric. They say, this is how we're going to judge the game. And a rubric might look like, it might include things like, we're going to look at thematics. We're going to look at the mechanics. We're going to look at the elegance, which is how things are, tied together and how fluidly things flow in the game. We'll look at the aesthetics, like what it actually looks like, how interesting the components are, as well as innovation, like how innovative is the idea behind this thing, or are we just rehashing old mechanics and old ideas, and originality, things like that. So, and then they'll, these criteria, and you'll get rated based on those things, and then you'll get feedback from each of the judges. Some of them are really good at giving feedback, that's the purpose of the competition. So the judges will give really meaningful feedback. Others you'll get basically no feedback. And so again, you just have to figure out which competitions that you're looking to participate in. And they'll usually be upfront to like what to expect. Because some of them are a lot better at giving really great feedback and others aren't. Plus it kind of think comes down to your game too. Some games are like, I don't have much to say here. And others, I think there's a lot to say, right? There's a lot of things that people can identify and want to talk about. And so, I don't know, it's kind of open. But anyway, as far as judging criteria, there's definitely not a standard or something that you can just like expect. This is how it always works. You even don't even know often how many people will be playing it in the final round. So some of them I felt like 3 or 4 people were playing it and that was it. And then others it felt like there were probably whole communities of people behind it that are playing, or like some big event, because you're getting a lot of feedback from a lot of different people, a lot of different places. So it's really tough to tell. Anyway, all right, next question. How are winners chosen? I mean, simply put, they'll probably take the rubric, right? You get rated, and then whoever's went the highest is going to be the winner. But again, usually the judges are a panel of publishers or individuals that are in the game design space, right? That have at least some degree of knowledge behind it or experience behind the process and things to look for, and that have a way at least to be able to rate or judge games objectively. And so it really comes down to like, who is that group of people, and however it is that they're given to, or however it is that they're asked to judge is what they'll do. So there's that. And another question, which is actually our last question here. We didn't have a lot of questions this time, but that's okay. This one is a kind of a big question though. It says, I'm about to enter my first contests. What should I know? Okay. Well, I've kind of covered off on a number of things, like things to expect when you're submitting, the types of things you're going to be asked to supply, kind of what to expect on the back end of how things are going to work. But I think what's good for anybody who's submitting their game into a competition is to first pause and ask yourself, like, really, what are my motivations for doing this? What do I expect to get out of this? Do I expect to actually win? Or do I have other motivations? Because I'll be completely frank, winning the competition for most of these competitions is probably not the primary aim for entering. There are a lot better reasons to submit your game to game design competitions than just winning. One of the first reasons is the feedback, right? Because you're getting exposed to a lot of different people, and usually part of the competitions are getting feedback, right? And so you just being able to get feedback from people who are seeing it for the first time, their first impression thoughts, different suggestions on like, oh, hey, you're making a video. If you did it this way or that way, it would be a lot more impactful. Just little tips like that help you for the next time. And then they help you for the next time. And they help you when you're pitching to a publisher. They're going to help you when you're down the road building a Kickstarter or whatever it is that you're doing. All those little bits of feedback, they add up. And so one reason to throw your game in, even if it's not all that refined or like ready to publish right now, is because you're going to get great feedback. Another good reason to enter into a board game design competition is that it gives you a deadline, and then it puts pressure on you to actually accomplish certain tasks, especially the competitions that have different rounds and require different things during different rounds, because you make it through the first round, all of a sudden you need to make a whole rule book. Well, you weren't planning on writing a rule book, and now you've got a deadline and you've got a task, and it really helps you focus what you're trying to do. Or if you make it past the next round, you might need to submit a physical prototype. Well, there were still a few rough patches. Now I need to make sure that game gets all smoothed out and all those rough patches are gone. So now you're focused on getting that part of the game done. So sometimes just having those deadlines there, knowing that you have to do a certain thing in a certain amount of time, and it needs to be a certain way so you can accomplish a certain goal or aim, that gives us a lot of motivation. It kind of gives us the goal and it focuses you. So it's another great reason to just submit your game, right? It just gives you a deadline, and it really compresses the things that you might have accomplished over a long period of time, and it compresses it into a very short period of time. And finally, another reason is exposure. Because as you submit, you're going to be exposed to communities, people who are enthusiastic about this, play testers, publishers, as well as personalities that are just in the industry or in this space who have a voice, and you get exposed to them, right? They become familiar with who you are and what you're doing and your project, and that type of exposure is fantastic. And then especially if you make it through to a finalist round or winning the competition, there's exposure, right? Because then there's going to be a little bit of PR, a little bit of media coverage as they tweet out or post out what the results were, and you'll get a little bit of buzz that starts happening. And so all of that stuff, the exposure, that's another good reason to participate, even if you might not win. That's okay, right? Because there's a lot of other reasons that are probably actually more valuable in the long run than actually winning. A bad reason for participating is hoping to get like some winning prize at the end, because I'll also tell you this: the rewards at the end are not big. There's not like a pot of gold for winning any of these things. All you're really getting is usually like a little label that is sometimes designed well, sometimes not designed well at all to use in your marketing efforts, and that's it, right? I mean, you might be lucky if maybe a company or something sponsored it and they might give you a gift card or something, right? But there's not like a lot on the back end beyond the exposure, beyond having the deadlines and the discipline to be able to participate in something like that, and beyond the feedback. So make sure that you just frame what your expectations are realistically, so you're not just like really disappointed if you don't make it all the way, because there's a lot of other things that are far more valuable than going all the way. Now, that said, if you are entering with the hope and the expectation of winning the competition, then it does require a slightly different mindset. And so let me tell you a little story to kind of frame my ideas on this. So as a graphic designer, as a graphic design student, I was able to participate in a number of what they call a portfolio review, where you take the different work that you're working on and you all sit down and you're able to show it, and people will come and they'll look through your work. So I had gone to a portfolio review, and I was only a junior. I was not showing my book. And so I was really just there to review other people's work. And this particular event had drawn the senior level designers that were the graduating designers from all over the state. Were all in this one event. And as I was going around, there was one person, one of those participants, whose book, their portfolio, was heads above everyone else's. I mean, it was very, very clear that this person had a sense of style, a sense of taste, who had skills that were so far beyond everyone else just by looking, just thumbing through his work. And it was really, really kind of inspiring to be like, whoa, like I was not expecting this level. And so as I was looking through his work, I had the opportunity to talk with him a little bit and asking him about, like, how do you get to this point? And he gave me this little bit of advice, and it's something that I've kind of carried with me and that I reflect on it enough that I'm sharing it with you today. But this is what he said to me. He said, listen, as a design student, it sometimes feels like you are competing against your fellow design students, your peers. And it feels that way because you're in your classroom and you're hanging work up on the wall and in a critique, and the only voices that are in there and the only work that's on the wall are the people that are around you. But that is a false reality. The truth is, as a design student, you are competing against professional, seasoned designers who have been doing this for decades. The jobs you're going after are the jobs they're going after. All of your work is going to be compared to their work. So if you want to play at the bigger level, you need to think bigger. You need to play bigger. You need to work harder. And you need to compare yourself to the professionals, not to the fellow students. And so that was kind of a little light bulb moment as I thought, oh, okay, interesting, because it was very clear that he was thinking about things in a completely different way. And his work was at a higher level, and it was competing at a completely different plane than everyone else that was around him. So I think there's a parallel with that little bit of advice here when it comes to board game design competitions and wanting to actually have something ready that is winnable. Because in all actuality, if you want to win, especially these bigger ones, these ones that actually have a bit of a clout behind them, your game will need to demonstrate excellence in creative thinking and innovative thinking, right? You'll need to have demonstrate an originality of idea, originality of mechanic and thematic development, elegance of gameplay. You'll need to demonstrate that your game easily fits on the shelf with all of those bigger, beloved, long-standing games that are out there. And part of that is it needs to look and feel like a real published game. And because as people interact with that and it feels like it's real, it feels like it's done, it's very exciting. It's like exhilarating for people to see that. And then when they start to envision like, oh, I could definitely see this on my shelf. I can definitely see this on my table. That is a really big moment, and it really does a lot of good to help you push past and push through different rounds and into the finals and into the winning spot. So think bigger. You have to play a little bit bigger, and you need to pay attention to all the details, all the little nuances, all those little things that you've been ignoring as you've been designing the game. You have to address face on and resolve them. Because those are the little fine-tuned things that will end up making the difference. And so there you go. There's my little bit of advice. Having not actually been a judge in any of these things, I don't know. Maybe they just played and they're like, yeah, I like that one, whatever. I don't know. But certainly as the way that I've approached it is I've poured my heart and soul, everything into everything that I've produced, and polished it up as much as I could possibly do. And so far so good. All right, everybody, there's a few answers to a few questions about board game design competitions. Hope that was helpful, and we'll do this again later. So until then, keep playing.